Hey folks, Matthew Weiss here, WeissAdvice.com and Weiss Advice here on YouTube. In this video, I want to talk about Handsome Audio Zulu 500. I did a little bit of a demo with Zulu 500 a few weeks ago, comparing it to some other tape emulators. This time, I reached out to Handsome Audio and hey, this is now a sponsored video where we're going to be going in depth into Zulu 500. I want to show how I've typically been using Zulu over the last few years on Mixbus, and then get to a few other ways that we can creatively use Zulu on some rock vocals and on some drums. So let's jump on in. So this first technique is what I use on Mixbus and mastering. The idea of this technique is to give a little bit of vibe to the overall record, but particularly to contour the top end. Basically, I work in a lot of genres where we're trying to get a very bright sound, but we don't want it to be harsh. So I'm going to play a little bit of this, and I've got a top end boost here. I'll play it without the top end boost. It's going to sound a little dull.
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused on me, he stay focused on me. You touch on my body, I'll be ready to go.
So it doesn't sound bad, but the shakers are a little bit repressed, the snap of the snare is a little dark, the vocals could use a little bit more air maybe, so I'm going to add just about 4 dB from a very, very high frequency corner.
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused on me, he stay focused on me. You touch on my body, I'll be ready to go. I get so inside.
So that's a little bit more appropriate. That's about 5 dB of top end, right? So it needed a good amount. Now, mind you, it's from a very high corner frequency, so don't freak out at 5 dB. It's 5 dB, but it's from, 20K here. So now I'm going to switch this over to a B setting, right? And I'm going to turn this way up to like 11 dB here. It's going to sound way too bright.
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused on me, he stay focused on me. You touch on my body, I'll be ready to.
It's actually not terrible. I'm going to push it a little bit further.
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused.
Okay, now the top end is starting to sound out of whack. So here's how I'm going to use Zulu. I'm going to bring Zulu in, and I'm also going to do some makeup gain on the back end. Now, Zulu here, this is kind of my Mixbus setting, although there's a little bit of variation here. The basic settings are like this. The deck is at 12 o'clock. It's the first position in. The bias is anywhere from 2 to 3 clicks as a starting point, depending on how much compression and roll-off I want to do to the top end. This is really our main focal point for the control. Enhance is 3 or 4 clicks up, usually 3. And then our headroom is going to be anywhere from the first click down to the 12 o'clock. So this just depends on how hot my output is / how much soft clipping I really want to get, and then calibration on the highest setting. So this is sort of my typical default starting here. You can call this the Matt Weiss setting right here. Okay, so one more time, that's 12 o'clock on the deck, 3 o'clock on the bias, just a little past 9 o'clock on the enhance, so like 10 o'clock on the enhance, and then 1 click down on the headroom, calibration at full. Matt Weiss Mixbus / mastering right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this.
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused on me, he stay focused on me. You touch on my body, I'll be ready to go. I get so excited, but you already know.
And what you hear is that the top end is actually kind of smushing down. So even though the amount of top end is kind of the same, it doesn't step forward and become as bright. So we're losing some of the harshness while retaining the quantity of top end in a really, really interesting and unique way. Now, I think this is still too much, so I'm either going to back it off a hair at the EQ, or I'm going to click the bias down 1 position. Let's try clicking the bias down 1 position here, right?
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused on me, he stay focused on me. You touch on my body, I'll be ready to go. I get so excited, but you already know.
So In terms of proportion of top end, I actually love that. I think it's the right amount of top end. However, I do think that it's getting a little too stuffed, so I think I'm going to set that bias back to where it was, and I'm just going to take this top end boost back down to about 10 dB.
Love a friend of my homie, move my body slowly. He stay focused on me, he stay focused on me. You touch on my body, I be ready to go. I get so excited, but you already know. I'm done waiting, no more playing. He keeps saying, oh yeah.
This is a great way to create a really hi-fi effect, because it allows you to push more of those frequencies that create that hi-fi image without them necessarily overwhelming the record. So I love this technique. I think that it's kind of a secret sauce technique. It's one of those things where it's like, if it wasn't for the fact that I have this like very deep philosophy about share everything, I think a lot of engineers would kind of keep this as like a secret, but I share everything. Zulu is an excellent tracking device. In fact, Langston, the designer of the Zulu, decided that he wanted to design it as a tracking device. It just so happens that I found a bunch of mix uses for it. But in this example, I'm going to show you my rock vocal preset, so to speak, or at least the idea behind it. And first I'm going to demonstrate it by singing my karaoke song, Like a Stone. So I've done 4 takes here. I'm going to show you the first one. This is dry, and we're not going to go too far on this one because honestly my dry voice is lackluster, but this is just straight in from the microphone going into my Avalon, and it sounds like this. On a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness on a freeway, I confess I was lost in. So sonically speaking, it actually sounds very good, but for something like a heavy rock kind of a thing where it's asking for more dirt and grit and vibe, I think that we're definitely off the mark here. So now what I want to do is take you through some really cool tracking settings I came up with here. This is going to be kind of like a rock vocal where it's giving some attitude, but it's not overtly distorted. On a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness by a freeway. So on the softer parts, you can hear there's a little bit of fuzz, a little bit of crunch, and then when we get to the louder parts, it starts to push back with a little fuzz. I like that setting quite a bit. I'll walk through it right now. This is on the lowest deck setting. This is with a little bit of the bias taken down. This is our enhance click to 2, which is just smoothing things out and providing a little bit of a compression effect. And then our headroom on the lowest as well, and we are on the lowest calibration. So it's a very dirty setting, but that enhance control right here is smoothing it out, cleaning it out, but it's definitely still there, still printed. However, I wanted to, and also the brightness is clicked in. Now I want to give you some heavier stuff. So I'm going to go to Zulu Dirty here. This is definitely going to be the most overt effect. This is the exact same setting, but with the enhance clicked all the way out. On a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness on a freeway, I confess I was lost in the... So really, really dirty setting, but really fun setting. I don't think it would be, I think it's too much for this. And then we're going to go over my Zulu Crunchy setting here. So that is on this channel right here. So I've got the deck turned to the P setting, the second lowest setting here. I've got the bias in the same position. I've got the enhance off. I've got the headroom turned to 12 o'clock here, and I'm on calibration 2 instead of calibration 1. So it's a little bit less dark in that effect. And it sounds like this. On a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness on a freeway, I confess I was lost in the pages. And you can hear it pushes back pretty hard. I like this effect, actually. This is obviously a very overt effect as well, but I like it. I actually think something very similar to this would work really well. But overall, my favorite effect for this particular song is this kind of heavy printed sort of hitting the tape too hard kind of thing where I have the enhance in, but I'm using very, very low tape settings. On a cobweb afternoon in a room full of emptiness by a freeway. It's just enough to give it that little bit of spice, that little bit of vibe. We can't talk tape effect without talking drums, so I'm going to serve these drums up two ways here. I'm going to first show you the classic Zulu tape compression approach, and then I'm going to show you a more lo-fi type of approach. This is like fine dining. I'm serving drums two ways. But before we get into the effect, of course, we want to hear the actual dry capture, and it sounds like this. Pretty darn good if I do say so myself. I'm actually going to have a video coming out on how I track these drums. I used 5 of the same microphone. It's all Circle Audio Evo 251, but that's for a later video. For now, let's focus on getting that tape compression going. So of course we're going to set up like we always set up, where we have our trim plugins making a little sandwich here, Zulu sandwich, so that we can manage our levels, pushing in, coming out. And I'm going to start with the mildest of these settings right here. I'm going to start with my deck out, my bias out, my enhance out, my headroom on the highest setting, and my calibration on the highest setting. So this is really the mildest Zulu sound that you can get. There's a little something there, but overall it's pretty transparent. You don't really hear it much. Now, what I'm going to start doing here is I'm going to start pushing a little too far. I'm going to start turning the deck down. If I were to turn it down to the lowest deck here, you're going to, right off the bat, hear some rounding of the transient. Right, so that's really great as like a soft limiter. I wouldn't exactly call that a tape compression effect. I would say it's it's like the start of getting to that tape compression effect. So now where I'm going to go here, if this is our soft limiter, I'm going to now go to our hard limiter. That's going to be our headroom controls. And I'm going to start getting pretty crunchy. So this sounds like we're hitting the tape way too hard, and that's actually my starting point for the tape compression, because the next little bit comes from this enhanced control. This enhanced control is going to smooth out that breakup. It's going to give us some of our headroom back, but it's also going to push up a parallel compression type of effect. So let's give that a before and after here. Let's just make sure we're kind of level matched. There we go. So that's about the right place. Now here's where we started. And here's with our Zulu compression. That's a really, really cool sound, and it's kind of the effect you would expect if you were hitting a really nice tape machine, just a little bit on the hard side, but not so hard that it was breaking up. So this is the classic Zulu compression formula, and what it is you go into the overdrive zone where you're really crunching things up with the headroom, and then you make up the smoothness using the enhance, which also pulls up the parallel compression. I'm going to go a little further with it. I'm going to push the deck down to the lowest setting. I'm going to turn the headroom down to the lowest setting, and I'm actually going to knock the calibration down to 3, which will darken the signal a little bit. gets us a really fat kind of compression sound, which can also be really cool. I typically prefer it a little bit more like how I just had it set a second ago, but I wanted to show you guys that because I think it's a neat sound. So if we listen to our before, nice and open. Now with Zulu on heavy compression, we hear a lot of the weight of the sound come up. We hear some room on the kick. The hats seem to come forward, and it's just a really cool sound. Now, let's get grungy. Let's start getting kind of lo-fi with it. So I'm going to push this back up to our previous setting. I'm going to keep the calibration on 3, but I'm going to give us a little bit of headroom back. I'm going to take the enhance down so that it's off again. And now I'm going to start messing with the bias control to really darken things up. So I'm also going to push into this a little harder. And Zulu 500 has a unique feature. We can actually brighten the signal even on high bias by pressing in this little B button right here. So without it, we have like a classic BigBeat sound, but without enough top end. As soon as I press this little B in, the big beat. It's a really, really cool sound. If we wanted to brighten it up a little further, we could even push the calibration back up, but I think it's going to lose a little mojo. Yeah, I kind of like it better one click down. And if we need a little bit more top end, this is one of the things about Zulu is that the way it compresses and acts, sometimes it's better to get the vibe with the Zulu, and then if we need to brighten it up or change the EQ, do that afterwards. So awesome lo-fi big beat type of vibe. So yeah, Zulu is a really versatile device. It can be a little daunting because there are a lot of controls that all kind of interlock and interweave, but once you get a feel for it and get basic settings that you like for certain applications, it can become part of your regular workflow. It can be used to hi-fi a signal, it can be used to lo-fi a signal, it can be used kind of as a typical signal processor in order to fit things in a nice way. It can be used in a very creative sound design type of way. It's a really great device. I'm glad you guys checked this out, and as we say here at Weiss Advice, we are musicians, sound is our instrument, and I will catch you next time.